There's a moment that almost everyone knows. Someone asks you for something, your time, your energy, a favor you don't want to do, and before you even answer, your body reacts. Your chest tightens, your stomach sinks, your mind starts racing. You already know the truth. You want to say no, but somehow, saying no feels worse than saying yes. So you hesitate, you smile, you agree. And the moment the conversation ends, the guilt starts. Not because you did something wrong, but because you almost protected yourself. If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Because that guilt you feel when you say no is not weakness, it's conditioning. Engaging call to action right after hook. Before we go any further, let me ask you something important. If you ever said yes just to keep the peace, felt anxious after setting a boundary, or felt like you owe people access to you, then pause for 1 second. Like this video, not for the algorithm, but so you remember that you're not alone in this. And if this hits close to home, stay until the end, because what we're about to uncover explains why this guilt feels so real and how it quietly controls your life. Now let's talk about what's really happening. The strange thing about guilt here is something most people never question. Why does guilt feel moral? Why does it feel like a sign that you're a good person? Think about it. When you lie, you feel guilty. When you hurt someone, you feel guilty. So your brain assumes greater than, if I feel guilty, I must be doing something wrong. But that assumption isn't always true, because guilt isn't a moral compass. It's an emotional alarm system, and like any alarm system, it can be miswired. You don't feel guilty because saying no is wrong. You feel guilty because your nervous system associates no with danger. Not physical danger, social danger. And humans are wired to fear social rejection almost as much as physical pain. Where this guilt really comes from, to understand this, you have to go back, not to a specific memory, but to a pattern. Most of us learned very early that being liked mattered. As a child, approval meant safety, disapproval meant stress, praise meant connection, disappointment meant distance, so you adapted. You learned what got smiles. You learned what avoided conflict. You learned what kept people close. And for many people, the lesson was simple. Greater than be helpful, be agreeable, don't be difficult. That lesson didn't come from one moment. It came from thousands of small emotional reactions. A sigh, a look, a change in tone, silence. Your nervous system noticed, and slowly, without you realizing it, a rule formed. Greater than saying no risks connection, that rule didn't disappear when you grew up. It just went underground. While your body panics before your mind does, have you ever noticed how fast the guilt appears? You don't decide to feel guilty. It just shows up. That's because this isn't a thought problem. It's a nervous system problem. Your body learned long before your mind had language. So when someone asks you for something and you consider saying no, your nervous system doesn't think greater than, is this reasonable? It thinks greater than, will this cost me connection? And if the answer feels uncertain, it triggers anxiety. That tight feeling in your chest, that urge to explain yourself, that sudden need to soften your response. That's not weakness. That's self-protection, shaped by experience. Why you explain yourself too much? This part is subtle but important. When you say no, do you notice how often you add reasons? I'm sorry, I would, but I wish I could. It's just that, maybe another time. Things are crazy right now. Those explanations aren't for logic. They're for emotional safety. Your brain is trying to prevent backlash before it happens. Over-explaining is your nervous system saying, greater than, please don't be upset. Please don't leave. And here's the problem. The more you explain, the more your no sounds negotiable. So people push. And when they push, the guilt deepens. Now the no feels even more dangerous. Why some people trigger your guilt more than others, notice this carefully. You don't feel guilty saying no to everyone. You feel guilty saying no to family, close friends, authority figures, emotionally expressive people. Why? Because guilt is strongest where emotional history exists. If someone has helped you before, sacrificed for you, shown disappointment in the past, your nervous system remembers. So even a small request feels loaded. Your brain doesn't respond to the request, it responds to the relationship. That's why a simple "can you help me" can feel like a heavy emotional weight. The uncomfortable truth about being nice here. A truth that's hard to hear, but necessary. People who feel guilty for saying no are usually not selfish. They're often highly empathetic, emotionally intelligent, conscientious, sensitive to others' moods. In other words, They care deeply, but caring without boundaries turns into emotional self-abandonment. And when you abandon yourself repeatedly, resentment grows, not outwardly. Internally, you start feeling drained, irritated, unseen, taken for granted, and then comes the second layer of guilt. Guilt for feeling resentful. Now you're trapped. How guilt trains you over time. Let's break down the pattern clearly. 1. Someone asks you for something too. You feel discomfort at the thought of saying number 3. You imagine their disappointment. 4. You say yes to relieve the discomfort. 5. The guilt disappears temporarily. Your brain learns something powerful. Greater than saying yes makes the anxiety stop. So next time, the guilt appears faster, and the yes comes easier. Over time, your default becomes compliance. Not because you agree, but because your nervous system wants peace. Why this doesn't mean people are evil. This is important. Most people who trigger your guilt are not villains. They're not sitting there thinking, greater than how can I control this person? Often, they're just expressing needs the only way they know how. But intent doesn't cancel impact, and unconscious pressure still shapes behavior. Someone doesn't have to mean harm for harm to occur. Why saying no feels like you redoing something wrong here is the core illusion. Your brain confuses discomfort with danger, disapproval with rejection, guilt with immorality. So when you say no and feel bad, your mind concludes, greater than this must be wrong. But discomfort is not a moral signal. It's a withdrawal symptom. You're withdrawing from a pattern that once kept you safe. Of course, it feels uncomfortable the moment most people give up. This is where most people stop trying. They say, this is just how I am. I don't want to hurt anyone. It's easier to just say yes. And for a while, that works. But slowly, something changes. You stop trusting your own limits. You start feeling responsible for everyone's feelings. And you forget that you are allowed to choose. This is where guilt stops being an emotion and starts being a control system. The question that changes everything. So here's the question you need to sit with. Greater than, am I feeling guilty because I'm doing something wrong, or because I'm doing something unfamiliar? Most people never ask this. And because they don't, guilt keeps running the show. But once you see this distinction, something shifts, because guilt loses its authority. And that's where things start to get interesting, because awareness alone isn't enough. The real challenge is what happens after you notice the guilt, when you still have to respond, and that's where most people get stuck. You've noticed it, haven't you? That tightness in your chest when you think about saying no, that little voice whispering that it's selfish, that it's wrong, that people will be upset or disappointed if you don't comply. That voice can feel like it's controlling you, yet the truth is, it's just your nervous system reacting to patterns you learned a long time ago. For years, maybe even decades, you trained yourself to avoid conflict, to maintain connection, to stay good by saying yes, even when your heart wanted to say no. And now, when you try to break free, that old pattern fights back, and it fights hard. The first few times you resist, you feel a surge of discomfort. Your mind races, imagining every possible reaction from the other person. Maybe they'll feel rejected, maybe they'll be disappointed, maybe they'll stop talking to you, or worse, they'll silently judge you. Your body anticipates all of that, even before your conscious mind has made a decision, and that anticipation produces guilt. It's intense, physical, almost unbearable at times. Your chest tightens, your stomach sinks, and your mind floods with excuses. But here's the thing, that guilt isn't a signal that you're redoing something wrong. It's a signal that you're doing something new. It's your nervous system noticing that the old rules no longer apply. And then the tricky part happens. Other people notice the change. The people who are used to your compliance, your flexibility, your willingness to accommodate, they feel it. They don't always react aggressively, but they respond. Some of them may withdraw emotionally, some may express disappointment, some may subtly guilt trip without even realizing it. Their reactions can trigger you further, making it feel like you did something wrong, when in reality, you simply set a boundary. And that's why most people go back to their old patterns, because the initial discomfort is intense, and the pushback from others feels like proof that they were wrong to try something different. But the truth is, discomfort does not equal wrongdoing. Saying no is not selfish. It is not cruel. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a choice. And like all new choices, it feels uncomfortable at first. Your body is learning something it has never learned before, that you can survive your own boundaries, that you can be present in a relationship and still protect your energy, that your self-respect does not have to come at the expense of connection. It's a radical truth, but once you experience it repeatedly, your nervous system begins to update itself. Slowly, quietly, the tightness in your chest fades. The racing thoughts settle. You learn that saying no is not catastrophic. You learn that your relationships do not crumble because you have limits. This process doesn't happen overnight. Each time you assert a boundary, the initial wave of guilt will return. Sometimes it will be stronger than the last. Sometimes you will be tempted to backtrack, to apologize, to explain yourself excessively. But here's the critical insight. Each time you resist that urge, you teach your nervous system a new rule. That rule is simple. Discomfort is temporary. Saying no is safe. Protecting yourself is allowed. And over time, that rule strengthens and the guilt loses its power. The fascinating part is how selective guilt is. You probably don't feel guilty saying no to every request, do you? No, you feel it most with people whose opinions matter to you. Family, close friends, coworkers, people whose approval you unconsciously value. That's because guilt is tied to your emotional history with someone. Your nervous system recalls every time you were rewarded for compliance or punished for defiance. That history fuels the intensity of the current moment. So even a simple request feels monumental, and the act of saying no feels like risking disconnection. And yet, this is exactly where the opportunity lies. If you can navigate this discomfort, you can reclaim control over your emotional life. One of the most important shifts is realizing that guilt is not morality. It feels like morality because your brain has been conditioned to associate guilt with being a good person. But morality is about intention and impact, not compliance and self-sacrifice. When you say yes to avoid guilt, you may be doing what others want, but are you doing what is right for yourself? That is the real question. And the answer, if you pay attention, often reveals that your old patterns were survival strategies, not ethical obligations. You were surviving in a world that demanded compliance, and that was not wrong. But surviving in that way now, when it costs you your peace and autonomy, is no longer necessary. So how do you act differently without becoming cold or unkind? The key is clarity. Short, firm, unapologetic responses work better than long, over-explained justifications. Instead of saying, "I would, but I'm really busy and I don't think I can help right now," try saying, "I can't do that. Period." No extra words, no emotional padding, no justifications. At first, this feels stark, maybe even harsh. Your mind protests, your body protests. But this is exactly how change happens. By removing negotiation, by letting the boundary exist unconditionally, you teach both yourself and others that your limits are real and valid. Over time, this clarity feels liberating. It does not make you unkind. It makes you predictable, dependable, and honest. Expect some resistance, though. People may be surprised by your newfound firmness. Some may try to guilt you, some may react with subtle disappointment, and that's okay. Healthy people will adjust. Unhealthy patterns will be revealed. That revelation may sting at first, but it also provides clarity. You no longer waste energy trying to please everyone or maintain impossible standards of compliance. You begin to notice which relationships thrive with authenticity and which depended on your sacrifice, and that awareness itself is liberating. This process is cumulative. Each small boundary you set reinforces the idea that you can exist safely without automatic compliance. Your nervous system begins to unlearn the old rules. The voice that says you must say yes grows quieter with each successful boundary. And eventually, you reach a point where saying no longer feels like a moral transgression, nor does it carry the same visceral physical discomfort. The guilt still exists occasionally, but it has lost its authority. It becomes an echo, not a command. It is important to understand that reclaiming your ability to say no is not a rejection of your empathetic, caring nature. On the contrary, it is an extension of it. Boundaries do not reduce your capacity to love or help. They preserve it. Without them, your empathy becomes diluted, your energy drained, and your goodwill exhausted. With boundaries, you can choose when, where, and how to invest your energy. And that choice is both empowering and sustainable. You can care deeply for others without losing yourself in the process. This journey is not about becoming hard, detached, or selfish. It is about trusting yourself. It is about understanding that your emotional health is not negotiable. You are allowed to have limits. You are allowed to protect your time, your energy, your space, and your mind. And the more consistently you practice, the more natural it becomes. Each experience reinforces the understanding that discomfort does not mean catastrophe, that saying no does not mean rejection, and that prioritizing yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Even when guilt resurfaces, it no longer carries the same weight. You can acknowledge it without obeying it. You can feel it, observe it, and let it pass. Over time, your relationship with guilt transforms. What once felt like a heavy, controlling force becomes a manageable sensation, a reminder that you are human, that change is uncomfortable, and that growth requires discomfort. And with that transformation comes freedom. Freedom to act intentionally, freedom to say no without fear, freedom to engage in relationships authentically rather than through automatic compliance. It is also vital to remember that the people in your life will respond to your shift in different ways. Some will appreciate the clarity, some may struggle, and some may attempt to manipulate the situation. That is a reflection of them, not you. Boundaries will reveal who truly respects you and who relies on your compliance to maintain their own comfort. That revelation can be uncomfortable, but it is also invaluable. It allows you to focus your energy on relationships that are reciprocal, healthy, and grounded in mutual respect. Through this process, you develop a deeper understanding of yourself. You begin to recognize patterns that no longer serve you. You gain insight into why you have historically prioritized others' comfort over your own well-being, and you learn that it is possible to recalibrate without losing your core empathy. Each step, each boundary, each uncomfortable moment survived reinforces your self-trust, and in that self-trust, the power of guilt diminishes. It may never disappear entirely, but it no longer dictates your decisions or undermines your peace. And finally, the most important lesson emerges: saying no is not an act of cruelty, defiance, or selfishness. It is an act of self-respect. It is a declaration that your needs, your time, and your energy matter. It is a statement that your value is not contingent upon perpetual availability or compliance. And the more you internalize this truth, the more your life transforms. Your relationships become more genuine, your choices more deliberate, and your inner peace more attainable. So the next time guilt arises, instead of arguing with it, observe it. Recognize its origin, acknowledge its presence, and remind yourself that discomfort does not equal wrongdoing. Remind yourself that boundaries are not betrayals. Remind yourself that you are allowed to exist fully and authentically. This is not selfishness. This is not defiance. This is life lived consciously, and with practice, patience, and self-compassion. Guilt becomes no more than a background murmur, a fleeting sensation that cannot control you. Remember, you are not broken. You are simply conditioned to survive in a world that demanded constant compliance. That strategy worked once. It does not have to work now. You are allowed to update your patterns, reclaim your power, and live without fear of guilt controlling every interaction. You are allowed to say no, and you are allowed to feel safe while doing so. And that realization, when it sinks in fully, is transformative. Disclaimer: this video is intended for educational and self-awareness purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health care. If feelings of guilt, anxiety, or people-pleasing patterns are severely affecting your daily life or relationships, please consult a licensed mental health professional.